This dog looked into a storm drain every day. When it was opened, people were shocked by what they found. Seeing dogs wherever people are isn't anything unusual. They're incredibly common to see as pets, part of security, working as guides, and in this case, as strays in the street. This is especially true in Istanbul, one of the major cities in Turkey. With a population of over 15 million people and an estimated 200,000 stray dogs, it's easy for strays to go unnoticed and blend into the background. The hero of our story was one of those strays, an unnamed German shepherd who would have gone completely unnoticed if it wasn't for how he consistently sat by the same storm drain every single day. He would diligently stand guard and peer down into the drain, only leaving his post to look for food. This odd behavior gained some attention from curious passers-by, though no one was curious enough to investigate. Then one day, while out looking for food, the German shepherd ended up in front of a butcher shop, most likely led there by the scent of the fresh meat on sale. One of the butcher shop's customers, a young woman named Annie, noticed the hungry dog as she walked out of the shop. Annie couldn't resist his big puppy eyes or the sound of his growling stomach, and she went right back in and asked the butcher for some cutoffs and bones. Annie then went back out and approached the dog, intending to give him the food, but the stray didn't approach her immediately, understandably wary of strangers after a life on the streets. This didn't deter Annie, as she stayed there holding out a bone for the dog to take. Eventually unable to resist his own hunger, and seeing that Annie meant no harm, the stray dog approached her and accepted the food she was offering. However, instead of eating it immediately as Annie would have expected, the dog simply took the food and walked off. This left Annie a bit confused, but she shrugged it off and continued on her way home. The following day, Annie encountered the dog again. This time, he recognized Annie and approached her with his tail wagging happily. Annie was delighted by the dog's friendliness and decided to buy the dog some sausages to eat before heading on her way. Then, in a repeat of what happened the previous day, the dog didn't eat immediately and instead walked off to head somewhere else, increasing Annie's curiosity. These events repeated again for a third day, and this time Annie was finally free to follow the dog and see what he was doing with the food. It was then that Annie saw the stray dog walk up to a storm drain in the middle of a busy street. The dog peered down into the drain, dropped some of the food into it, and then began eating its share. This left Annie more confused than ever, but it didn't stop her from continuing to feed the poor stray whenever she could. After a few more days of seeing the dog repeating this behavior, Annie couldn't rein in her curiosity anymore and decided to see what was down there. What Annie saw inside the drain immediately had her calling the fire department. Two firemen were quick to arrive at the scene, but the protective stray dog wouldn't let them approach the drain just yet. Thankfully, Annie was there to soothe the stray, and the firemen were able to continue with their jobs. As the drain was opened, a crowd of curious passers-by got to witness the firemen bring out a kitten from underneath, followed by another and another, until they brought out a total of 5 kittens. It turns out that the poor kittens had been trapped under the storm drain, likely due to heavy rain. The firemen noted that despite being trapped for some time, none of the kittens were starving, and Annie immediately knew that this was probably due to the efforts of the stray dog. Inspired by the dog's selflessness, Annie decided to foster the kittens until she could find them their forever homes. As Annie walked away with the kittens in her arms, she also called out for the dog to follow her home, saying, "Come on, Benny, it's time to go home." Now the stray dog, newly named Benny, and the 5 kittens have all found loving homes.